Maybe he did. Maybe he's trying to get in on the Zoom link.
I know.
I know.
thought.
I know.
How come I can't get in on Zoom? I'm sorry, there's no Zoom available.
I
Right?
told him, I said, look, keep Alvy quiet.
Yeah.
I'll do my best. He's got such a deep voice is the problem. All right.
What a day.
Yes.
So I guess we're live.
And what a difference a day makes. Yes. I've been a lot of places. I've done a lot of things, but never done anything as good as this. You know, because I missed my last doctor's appointment. So.
All righty, we are live now on Facebook.
Wow. What an incredible opportunity for the Stepping Up Initiative and all the people out there in Facebook land.
That's so nice.
Yes.
Hello, folks. This is Sean Kimball with Rockdale County Public Relations. Just a reminder, we are not at the 6 o'clock time frame, so probably want to wait till about 6:03 or 6:04 just to give time for people to get onto Facebook and start watching before the actual meeting starts.
Okay, we can do that.
We can still have a party until they come, till they're
That's
showing
right.
up, right? We'll be having a little bit of fun as we get into it. Can be a heavy conversation.
So, Deidre, where do you live?
So I actually do live in Tucker.
Okay.
I'm here in Atlanta, in this area, even though I still do quite a lot, connected to Yale and Connecticut, but I'm happy to not be right now where all the snow has been and it keeps getting cold there.
Yes, it does, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Dr. Lewis, are you close by or?
I live in Conyers. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, though, and came to Georgia in 2006. So
Nice.
I'm enjoying the heat. Still.
Oh, yeah. And you've been here a while.
I do not miss the snow.
No. The only good thing in some at times is that, it kills the bugs. And so you don't have, sometimes I want to be like, can we get a really good cold here just to like have a fewer mosquitoes, but
Right.
we trade those things. Yeah.
Well, I grew up in California, Central California.
Okay.
And it's a dry heat in the summer
Mm-hmm.
and a foggy cold in the winter.
Yes. I spent quite a bit of time in Oakland.
Okay.
On a project there for 5 years. And I would go into San Francisco and it'd be, it's like not that far apart and it's like 10 degrees difference every time.
Right.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So going to San Francisco in the summer is a relief from the Central Valley heat.
That's true. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was good experiences out there in that community.
So, Tracy, you just finished a whole workshop on grief. You're on mute,
Tracy.
We're on a third week of our 8 weeks. So we're actually entering into the 4th week now.
Okay. So you're in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going really well.
Well, good.
It's been a great experience to be able to connect with some Rockdale residents and, people from other states as well. So being a good attendance for the first virtual event that our ministry's done. So, it's we're learning all kinds of things as we go, but
right.
People are really getting a lot out of it.
And Brother Michael, where's he from?
He is from Kenya.
Okay. Okay.
Nice.
I think that's the nicest thing. Remember when we used to have to, if we had an engagement, we had to leave, show up early, figure out what the lay of the land was. This is just, there are some things I hope we don't go back to.
Having to find a decent place to eat.
Or park.
Right.
And park.
That parking is brutal, man.
Right. And dealing with traffic, especially if
yes.
you're going into Atlanta.
Yes.
I have not missed that at all.
I had so many people who would be like, we won't come to Atlanta.
Yeah, I know,
I don't
right?
want to drive to Atlanta.
That's funny. It's 6 o'clock, and I just want to let everybody know that we're going to wait just 2 or 3 more minutes just to have people have time to find the Facebook page and click onto it, or get onto the RockdaleCountyGA.gov website and watch it being streamed from there too. So just sit tight. We're just kind of conversing amongst ourselves for a minute or two, and you're welcome to listen in.
Yeah, I've got some people messaging me that they don't have a Facebook account and where to go. So it's Rockdale County GA.
Rockdale
County GA. Okay.
.gov, G-O-V. Janetta, where exactly? Oh, I see us. Okay. So if you're trying to get onto the Rockdale County website also, you're going to scroll down to Board of Commissioners videos. It's on the home page. And you will see a Zoom picture with Bill Carruthers in Stepping Up, Dr. Deidre Hawkins, Dr. Tracy Lewis, and me. Okay, it's 6:03, and I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I am really feeling quite passionate about the topic tonight that we're going to talk about. It's something that has resonated with me for quite some time now, and I think that it has with other people also. I am Dorian Williams. I am a county commissioner, post 2 here in Rockdale County. And I welcome you tonight. We have an excellent group of people who are going to speak and share with us their professional expertise. If you notice, we have 2 doctors, and so we are really appreciative of their taking their time to be with us tonight. Bill Carruthers is our project developer for our Stepping Up initiative, which deals with our recovery community, with our accountability court participants. And I appreciate him recommending these 2 speakers for tonight also. I want to give you just a little bit of background. I was doing some research this afternoon, and the New York Times a couple weeks ago said many people have lost precious time with family and friends, or they've been forced to cancel travel plans and miss milestone events like graduations and weddings. In the hierarchy of human suffering during the pandemic, A canceled prom, a lost vacation, or missing out on seeing a child's first steps may not sound like much, but mental health experts say that all loss needs to be acknowledged and grieved.
Mhm.
And that's not to mention those who have lost family members and friends because of the pandemic. Another interesting thing is that the Harvard Gazette commented that normally about 1 in 5 Americans suffer from some kind of mental health issue. During the pandemic, that has raised to 2 in 5. So that's nearly half of us. So if it's not you, it's bound to be someone around you. And so paying attention to this whole process of recovery, of resilience, should be helpful for all of us. So I would like to start with Dr. Tracy Lewis. Bill Carruthers is going to give us a little background information about her before she and I have a conversation.
So good evening, everybody out there. And first and foremost, a shout out to Commissioner Williams, our fearless leader, for bringing us these opportunities for information as well as revelation. So shout out to her, because without her, this probably wouldn't be happening. And to that point, I would like to introduce Dr. Tracy Lewis, who is she's our very own, let me say our very own Dr. Tracy Lewis, who not only does she have New Directions, which is a housing component here, but she personally has embraced so many people. She has embraced our recovery community. She has partnered with Stepping Up with open arms in the pursuit of making a better world, a better place, and a better opportunity for people to recover. So without any further ado, I give to you Dr. Tracy Lewis.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Lewis, if you'll just go ahead and give us some background information.
Well, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to come on and share, because the area of grief is a very important and passionate desire of mine to help people process grief and process loss. As I've been working with recovering addicts, and I've spent 34 years now in ministry and 20 of those years pastoring also, I found that loss is a thread of a common thread in all humanity. And we live in a culture today where we're taught to get things, but we're not taught how to lose them. And that becomes an issue. And so in my endeavor to help people process pain and not have to do what I did to process pain, which was read self-help book after self-help book through the process over about 20 years to really clean out that pot of pain in my own life from personal experiences, that I could actually get skilled and trained in that, and became a grief recovery specialist about 6 years ago now through the Grief Recovery Institute. And I've taken that course into the jails and different things, but now I've coupled it together with some of the other training I've had with biblical specialty counseling and also some things in psychology and therapeutic interventions, and put all those things together to make the process even better for people. And so one of the things when it comes to loss and it comes to grief, and not living in a society where people like to feel someone else expressing negative emotion. When people start to tell you I'm not fine, that puts a big red flag, and people don't know what to say. People don't know what to do. And part of the reason of that is the average human being generally might go through, the average human being, not the person who's been through in poverty-stricken areas, not the person who's been in addiction areas, but the average American human being might suffer 9 significant losses throughout their life. So and deaths, maybe 3 or 4 significant people in their life may die. So we're not accustomed, and it's not a common practice to process loss. But what we don't realize is loss is more than just death. And the pandemic has definitely brought that to the surface. It's definitely been brought to the surface working with people in recovery from all kinds of different things. And one thing I want to say is there are over 44 different losses that people go through. And I'll give you a few of those. The average person, any person, may go through divorce. They may go through the loss of a child. They may go through the loss of their parents. They may have been raised, they may have been adopted. Some of the other losses could be graduation, because what grief is a natural, normal reaction to a loss. And the other thing that it is at the end of something, and also the conflicting feelings that we feel when our pattern of doing things is abruptly changed, a normal pattern of behavior. And so all of our society is already suffering from a lot of emotional damage and loss. But as I was thinking about it today, in my lifetime, there really hasn't been anything that the whole globe or the whole United States has ever suffered loss together. We haven't gone through a war. We haven't gone through the Great Depression. We haven't gone through some of the things that are in our history. But in my lifetime, that has never happened. So in this pandemic, not only are people already processing all these other losses, which we don't have enough time for me to get into all those 44 losses, but it's whenever something ends or the familiar pattern and way of doing things is changed and altered. And so that could be you graduated from high school. So your normal pattern of going to school every day, seeing your friends, going through this routine, getting up in the morning. It could be retirement. You worked in a job for 30 years. You now are retired. You don't see the people that you used to see every day. You have to make a whole new pattern of living. You're excited about that event coming and that fulfillment of an obligation being finished, not knowing you're about to go through grief. Your children moving out of your home after they're grown, and you have the empty nest. That's another type of loss. So we go through those losses. But then on top of that, now we have a pandemic. And that pandemic has brought multiple losses on top of other losses that haven't been processed and people haven't worked through. And some of those in the pandemic, maybe some of the people listening that have gone through these things. You weren't able to be at the birth of your grandchild. You weren't able to be at the death of a parent or a sister or a friend, or you weren't able to visit someone in the nursing home who you used to go every week and see. You weren't able to go over to your grandmother's house and have Sunday afternoon dinner with her. You weren't able to go to sporting events, or your children's school activities were canceled. You went from working in an office to working at home to having daycare, school at home. And so all of these things are losses because our familiar pattern of how we've experienced life has been altered and has been changed. The supply and demand of things, being able to go and being restricted from places that we can go, restricted from people that we love, the ability to communicate on a personal touch place. And although it's brought other good things, these are some of the losses that people have experienced. And we need to know how to process those things.
Well,
So you might have a question.
So how everybody experiences grief in a different way. And let me just stop for just a minute and tell people that if you have a question that you think of while one of our speakers is speaking, if you will put it into the comment in the Facebook stream, then we will capture those questions, and we have set aside quite a few minutes, 10-15 minutes at the end for questions, and maybe more. So be thinking about your questions. So coming back to talking about the grief during the pandemic. So I had a really unusual experience this last weekend. I got to see my new grandson, who's 3 months old now, for the first time. And along with that were 6 others of my grandchildren that live locally and were able to get together with us. And I felt very deeply all the things that we had missed over the last year. And it caught me off guard. I didn't expect that. But, you know, somebody else may experience something similar in a very different way. So talk about how grief is different for different people.
Well, one of the things is that we have a relationship with material things. We have a relationship with people. We have a relationship with our community. And every one of us has a unique relationship. For example, a lot of people go out to eat and that's where they have their social life, and they weren't able to go and eat at a restaurant. So they experienced a loss of something, but for another person, they never go out to eat. So that they didn't experience that loss. They might go out to eat once a month where someone else goes out to eat every day. There's a group of seniors that meets at the McDonald's on 138 every morning, and they're there from sun up until noon. And they haven't been able to have that place where they meet their other elderly friends. And so these things are, everyone's relationship is unique. So if during the pandemic or prior to it, your mother died and my mother died, that doesn't mean we're grieving the same. Because my relationship with my mother may be that we saw each other every 5 years. Your relationship with your mother may be that you went to her house every day, talked to her on the phone 6 times a day. And so our relationships are unique. So our loss is also unique in the level of that loss. Does that help to bring understanding?
It does to me. I hope it does to our listening audience tonight. And so in your grief program that you're doing, you also talk about recovery from grief. And I know Dr. Hawkins is going to speak about that also. But as I thought about it, I thought it never hurts to get 2 people's perspectives, because no one ever approaches a topic in exactly the same way. So can you speak to recovery from grief for a minute?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we do first is to identify grief, to define it, then to explain the importance of removing it, because what grief is the pain. We're not removing the situation or what happened to us, but we're removing our relationship with pain. And we're saying goodbye to the pain that loss brought to us. And the way that we do that is through communication. And so we go through a process of discovering our losses and writing them down and communicating those losses, and then taking 1 or 2 of those losses at a time and communicating our story about that one particular event. And then we go through a series of apologies, forgivenesses, and significant statements. And we write a letter to that thing, and we say goodbye to that pain. I had an incredible opportunity to reach out to a woman a few years ago whose daughter was murdered. And she had become housebound. She had been unable to function any longer due to the loss of her only child, who was murdered by a family member that she sent them away to. And it was just such a devastating issue. And she couldn't process that pain by herself. And she didn't know how. And so we tried to do that with her just one-on-one. But I found that when she got around a group of people who also had significant loss, she was able to open her heart up and share about those things. And so that's how we work the process, is first understanding that if we don't deal with our grief, the external things that will begin to take place that are also unhealthy, dysfunctional behaviors and illnesses and things that we repress become physical illness. Things that we release can become destructive behaviors. And so we talk about all those things, because grief left unmanaged and unresolved will bring about one of those 2 things. It'll bring about destructive, unhealthy behaviors and an unhappy, miserable life, or sickness and disease.
Thank you. So Dr. Hawkins, in thinking about grief and the pandemic, what are some of your thoughts as Dr. Lewis was talking? What would you like to share with us about that?
Thank you. So first, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to be here, to Dr. Lewis for getting us started, to Bill for always, inviting me here, and Commissioner, just for you opening up this space. There's so much I could share. So can you hear me?
I can. Let me stop you for just a minute and let me have Bill share some information about you and introduce you to
Keep
the
it
audience.
very short, Bill.
Okay, let me see how short I can make it. So, ladies and gentlemen out there in Facebook land, we got a real treat. We have a lady that has been mentoring me for the last 10 years. And this lady is phenomenal in her approach to the recovery concepts, and her approach to equity, and her approach to changing people's lives. So without any further ado, brought to you from Yale and from Harvard and from all these other places that she's been, from Philadelphia and from California and from all those places, but brought to you here tonight on your screen, absolutely free, is the world-renowned Dr. Deidre Hawkins, the Hawkins Effect.
The Hawkins. Thank you, Bill. So now I'm like, what was I going to actually talk about? So let me just say, I live here in Atlanta. I have a Connecticut phone number. Yes, spent quite a lot of time in lots of different places. And I told Bill, it's hard for me to think about what to share in 10 or 15 minutes because I usually have like a couple days with folks to really unpack, listen, create connection and community. So I just wanted to share a few thoughts that I've had about all of, what we're talking about, and a big doorway for me into this work is understanding what it takes to heal from racism. So I'm very interested in healing. I understand grief, but grief on many different levels that has been part of a legacy in all of our lives if we are here in America. From just the settlers arriving here and the grief that they were escaping, as well as what has been passed on generationally in terms of trauma. So I think a lot about trauma. I think a lot about what it takes to heal. And I really think that one of the things that we can do more of is learn from the recovery community by stopping to do something what I call listen and believe. I'm trained as a clinical psychologist. I always tell people that I don't necessarily do what I was trained to do because I really do try to listen and believe and follow where people are. And I think that some of our work, when people talk about not feeling well, right now I hear a lot of people in the Black community talk about like having a loss of taste, having difficulty just finding their voice. And we had to speak directly to that to say that it's, that's real. And it's not just in your head, that the way that we sit with grief, the way we sit with trauma ends up in our bodies. And it's not something you can just intellectually think your way through. So there are things that we can be doing to really help us in terms of resilience that I think we can be more active in. And that can be playing cards, with yourself and with others. That can be drumming. That can be conversations that we need to tell. We need to be better at telling our own stories. And then we need to be better at actually owning our truth. So I like to encourage people to not talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, but to talk about the true, the possible, and the good. And to really pay attention to how we think about outweighing the negatives and positives to get out of this binary way of thinking about the world. That we have to really understand that joy and life is in meeting and is in the full continuum of things. So when I think about a nice meal, there's a whole lot of different things that are going on in that meal. I'm not just thinking about, salt and pepper. I want to have a little bit of, a little cayenne in there, a little taste here, the sweet and the sour, like to have the whole range. And so the more that we can add that flavor in, I think makes a big difference. And then the other two things I would just offer is that sometimes we don't really understand how important it is to acknowledge that pain is real. and that we need to be able to sit with it because it might be telling us something. I was an athlete and I was initially trained to kind of work through pain. And in the last few years and in working with trauma, I've really learned that we have to learn to pay attention to the pain and not try to escape it and not numb it, but actually listen and learn from it. And that when we do that and in our healing, especially with others, there's ways that other people's stories can help us with our own healing, and sitting with that, giving ourselves time to sit with and to be with and be alongside with. And right now, if you're watching, we're nodding together. This is part of healing, nod with people, rock with people, hum with people, move, light a candle. So I like to try to think of things that are very realistic, but also might be a little bit outside of the box. From the ways that we learn to embrace movies, the ways that we learn to embrace hearing someone else's story and then asking a different question out of that story. Again, getting out of that binary way of thinking and asking ourselves, I wonder what happened, or asking people, where does it hurt? Ruby Sales helps us ask that question, where does it hurt? And then listening and believing people when they tell you what it is and where it is, and not necessarily jumping in to try to fix. So I'll end there with just a few things that are I can share, but I'm happy to have, going back and forth, because as I told Bill, I can talk about a bunch of different things and I have a bunch of notes, so we'll just see which ones actually fit and make sense.
Well, so in the middle of this global pandemic, we had a lot of social unrest last summer. And
now.
And continuing on, right. And that brought its own kind of confusion and lack of understanding and its own level of grief compounded upon that. So I know you've done a lot with social justice and equity and racial discrimination and that. Speak to that in terms of the pandemic and how that has been a problem and been aggravated.
So, it's really quite remarkable in this last year, having to move into this virtual space, and talking about the fact that we are dealing with multiple epidemics or pandemics, with racism, with COVID, and now misogyny and sexism, as all of us are also dealing with the realities of what has happened in Atlanta, and the attacks in our the Asian community, Asian Pacific Islander communities, and the intersections there. So an opportunity that we've had is to move what we call a dinner experience, where we bring people together to share their stories about race and racism, and to actually talk and share our own personal stories. So just yesterday, there was a group that's called Equitable. We had a dinner series. It starts off with a piece of art where someone does a play. And the play yesterday talked about this intersection, and what's happening during the pandemic. So when I think about what has happened now, there are both some things that are really remarkable because we're able to come together in a safe space and talk about these very difficult conversations, but we're also very isolated, right? These are some of the things that we're isolated. It's hard to get good information. It's hard to filter the information. It's difficult in COVID. What I've noticed with a lot of people is that they might binge news that is actually harmful to them. And so we need to be mindful of what we're taking in and mindful of where we show up. So I think a lot about in recovery, showing up is really important. Being able to tell your story is really important. Having people, again, listen and believe you. And in COVID, we have also lots of misinformation, and there's some communities, especially the Black and Brown communities, that are actually wanting to get the vaccine and are having difficulties finding access points to those. That with the correct information, people are more interested and willing. I know I've personally had the opportunity to share that, I got my first shot, and that it's that we can think about, answer people's questions like it's not a live virus that you're getting. And we can help do some of the correct disinformation that's out there. So as you're, thinking about those questions, I think the more that we can have people ask what their authentic questions are, and then maybe actually ask them to tell you a story related to what the question is, gives us more of an opportunity in this time to slow down. So early in the pandemic, there was kind of a slowing down. For some of us, especially in the healthcare world, it was actually a speeding up. And so we're not all, like we talked about grief already, we're all experiencing it at very different levels. And so I want to always just tell people whatever you're experiencing is real right now. And that you deserve to be able to say no and create boundaries. And that self-care is not always going to get a manicure or pedicure. Sometimes self-care is just crying. Sometimes self-care is actually, going out and screaming, beating up that pillow, letting it out. And that in that expressing of our feelings, that's part of what we need to be able to do. And that it's also okay to, take a mental health break and to ask for that. And just to give yourself permission to be vulnerable and to be human.
Thank you. So Tracy, Dr. Lewis,
Huh?
you mentioned about the woman whose daughter was murdered and couldn't really talk about it until she met with a group of other people with similar experiences. So we've been in this pandemic where we've been isolated and told, keep your distance, wear your mask, don't get really close to people. And so what is your suggestion? Because we're still, even though people are getting vaccinated, we're still under the guidelines of social distancing, wearing a mask, and staying away from large crowds. So what suggestions do you have?
Well, and one other thing I want to point out too, another component of all this is also the increase of fear in people. And so one of the things that we can all do as individuals, just because we can't be with someone physically doesn't mean we can't be with them. And it might mean we have to return to some of our old ways of doing things. For me, it's sending people a text message on a regular basis. Hey, I'm thinking about you today. How are you doing today? Are you okay? Them being able to express their feelings, maybe picking up the phone then and continuing the conversation that way. Getting on Zoom or a Facebook Live or a FaceTime or Snapchat for the younger generation. Get on some kind of video type of thing that gives that human connection. For myself, because I work with people who do not have transportation and were in those kind of jobs that were necessary, I never really was able for my own personal self to remain in any kind of safe capacity or social distancing, because I had people going out to workplaces that were essential workplaces, coming back in my vehicle, driving them to their destination. I have 3 different homes that I'm working with people. And so I had to battle a lot of fear in those things. And so what I did, and as Dr. Deja was saying about, we have to inform people. So I did a little video of what can you do, doing apple cider vinegar, doing breathing treatments every day, taking airborne type of, building your immune system, studying on those things for myself, and then sharing them with other people who might not take the time to study them, and let them know these are some of the things you can do to feel safe. and expressing loss. You know, a lot of it is really, we can connect with people if we want to, and if we choose to. We may not be able to do it the way we're used to, but we can use other methods of connection. So for me, it's sending out little note cards again. It's calling people more frequently, texting people more frequently, and doing some things like that. Sending, I had one particular lady that I just sent a little care package to her because she had had a falling out over this pandemic. A family event came about, and the family refused to attend her child's birthday. And she felt like her family should at least be able to come together. Then they wouldn't speak to her, these kind of things. So, you know, I was prompted to send her a little care package and let her know that even though her family didn't understand her, other people did. And we were here for her, and we acknowledged her pain. And if she wanted to talk, I was there for her. So we can do different things like that. I do a lot of blogging and a lot of informational videos. Those kind of things are helping people because they're on social media so much now because they can't do other social things. So we've learned how to utilize social media, I think, in some tremendous ways, and even given us more opportunity to saturate. And even as Dr. Gigi was talking about, you know, racism and some of these other issues in our society that have to be spoken about and have to be addressed, even in the grief and in the recovery, people have expressed that they are feeling more comfortable on a virtual setting to tell their truth than they could in person, because they feel a little safer in their own environment to open up. So actually our conversations might become even stronger and better to heal one another as we, you know, confess things and we speak about things. That's where healing really comes from.
And Dr. Deidre, would you like to add to that?
I'm just agreeing so much with the importance of being able to talk and share those stories and have people be able to just really hear them, kind of sit with them. It's definitely a shift in our country where there is more and more awareness that we need to just be able to hear the story and not get so defensive about them. And that when someone is talking about racism, they're not calling you a bad person. And so as much as possible, really learning about that, leaning into those conversations. In the provider world, I want to encourage all of us, if you're in a position of power, if you're in the position of being a healer, to be able to speak directly about issues of racism, of pain, of recovery, lift up the hope of recovery, lift up the hope of, you know, and what resilience is, encourage people to practice gratitude, for example, encourage people to practice compassion. So I talk to people about principles around compassionate listening, and that one of those principles is that listening really can be enough. And I think that in terms of resilience and healing, they're all connected in that way. Like listening can be enough. That maybe there will be some conflict. And what you can say is, I want to be in a dialogue instead of debate you, you know. I think that there's great ways that we can use social media, but we also need to know that social media is where a lot of people are struggling, and where social media is what I call a monologue. It is not dialogue, okay? I'm not the only one who says that, but I just want people to know that it's one-way communication. And so you have to be really intentional when we think about things like microaggressions, or you're trying to correct someone's view about racism. It's probably not going to happen well on social media. So just, you know, find a way to accept that and you know, think about it in a different kind of way. I think that the other thing I like to try to highlight to people is that some of us have experiences with power that are very coercive. And I would encourage you to connect with other sources of power, like a higher power, like internal power, like collaborative power, to explore that there's a different way to experience power that is actually loving and being alongside each other, and that it's about holding on to hope, giving people choice, and talking about what will it take to create trust in this relationship. So we talk a lot about voice, choice, and trust, and just keeping it simple related to that and where people are, and inviting them to help you in that journey so that we can share power and not always have these experiences of power over, which is part of where trauma and grief come from, right? Is that loss of power and control.
Yes, and if I can speak to that as well, one of the things that we have as far as social media too is that I'm utilizing with the Victory Over Grief is, even though I'm doing a teaching video, we're having a Zoom chat after where everyone can express, because you're correct. And, in fact, just traveling in other countries, I've seen a learning pattern that we need to learn how to have in America, where it's a joint effort. We learn and we conversate together, and there are no big U's and or big I's and little U's. We all have something to contribute. And I think that can break and sever some of those things. But the thing that you said, Dr. Deidre, that's really powerful is about our story. And I think as we, as healers, as leaders, are the more transparent we can be, it makes it available to others. When I share my stories and I share the things that have happened in my life, people see you healed and happy and whole, and they think nothing ever happened to you. So if you don't tell your story, how will they know? And then also that listening and that motivational interviewing and reflective listening that will really give people the opportunity in their own time to share what they're ready to share.
So thank you. I like those thoughts. Gratitude, compassion, listening, reaching out, trust. Those are all things those are the kinds of things that help us overcome our grief as we're moving forward. And I really like the idea of stories. One of the threads of my dissertation when I was doing my doctoral work was the power of a narrative.
Oh, yes.
And how that can affect your life. And that's a way to deal with grief also. So Janetta says that we have a question. So Janetta, would you like to read that question, please?
Yes, I will. So it is coming from an Afia King, and she asks if there are any recommendations for resources to help young people about middle school or high school age deal with grief and building resiliency.
Okay, so let's focus on teenagers and preteens right now for a minute. What can you share with us for them? Dr. Hawkins?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that in working with young people, we're working with a few school systems right now, is that we know that young people need us to be able to talk directly to these issues too. And the teachers initially were very hesitant to raise up and talk about what's happening in society, thinking, oh, it doesn't belong here, or this is, too political. This is, that needs to be addressed with family members. I think our institutions, our families, our communities all have a responsibility to, again, be able to speak directly to issues around pain, the same kinds of things. And that we also need to pay attention to how grief, trauma, pain look different with young people. And that they don't necessarily have the skills. Like, we try to keep things in this very intellectual kind of way, and we should use like our art, our music, movement. We need to use other ways of working and supporting and encouraging them to express themselves, and not just look at, some of the ways that we process things. It's not just about, sitting and talking. Sometimes it's, less about that than it is about getting out and, just playing a game, finding some safe ways ways to do that, and understanding the social and emotional needs that our students really have. There's also a number of resources that are available when we think about our education systems and reaching out to our behavioral health providers. So I would have a high expectation that you can get help, and don't stop until you have it. I think sometimes we give up too soon, and we're not saying we really need help. The way that kids ask for help is very different, so just pay attention to that.
And that's interesting, because one of the articles that I read, this one again from the Harvard Gazette, this professor says that COVID is impacting the older age group more, but anxiety and depression are being faced by the young adults much more, which is exactly the opposite of what we've seen in some of the earlier crises. It's the young adults and the children who are being impacted. And he feels like that's going to be long lasting. And so it's going to be really important for us to support our youth and you know, give them the tools they need.
And the time. If I could add anything, it would be the time. I think with children, we tend to think, oh, it's done, but we need to recognize that this is going to be ongoing. So I hope that we can set some different expectations, that we're not just getting right back to things, that when children are quote unquote acting out, that we maybe name it instead of like blaming them. So we're going to have a lot of work to do. But I also think it's very worthwhile. Like, it's just finding ways to be much more human, and to be much more, to do more turning into our young people and giving them those tools that will be lifelong. This will be lifelong. All of us are in this, in a lifelong, you know, impact for this.
And having spent 30 years in a classroom, I know that kids want to talk.
Yes.
And they want to share. And they're really genuine. And it can really make a difference. So teachers, as well as parents and grandparents, need to be aware of all of that. Dr. Lewis, do you have something to share about youth and young?
I really agree with using the arts and drawings and telling stories and these types of ways to help children process loss. And the Grief Recovery Method actually has a book that helps parents how to take their children through loss. I can't remember the title completely, but it's by the Grief Recovery Method, and it is entitled Helping Children Process Loss, Parents Helping Children, because we have to help them. They don't know how to do it. And if we don't know how to do it, we certainly can't help them, right? So we have to first become informed ourselves. But I think a lot goes back to one particular thing, and that is love, love, because love never fails, and it can heal so many places and so many things. I have 6 grandchildren from 2 to 12, and I've seen it affect every one of them in a different way. And just being able to call on the FaceTime and they get to see Nana that way is something that they look forward to now. And I read them a story on the Facebook, and they draw me a picture and they show me a picture and they tell me about what they did today. And, my son just recently took the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old out to pick out a toy of their own that they hadn't gone out and shopped since the pandemic. And they got to go, the very first time they got to go out, they got to choose their own toy. And the pictures of that are just precious, and taking a lot of photographs and building memories and, doing art things with your children and craft things and helping them remember this as a time where they can grow instead of a time that's broken. I think my 10-year-old granddaughter has gone through the most significant loss in being out of school, being a very extrovert child, very social child. And then, bantering on Facebook or social media with their friends. You didn't call me back. You didn't talk to me. You know, things that you don't normally deal with till you're 15 are happening earlier, and access to different things that are also, you know, unhealthy for children is something we have to watch out for.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen that with my grandchildren, and I think the stories, the art projects, the going out on little outings, like we did a picnic in the backyard. You know, we didn't go anywhere, but to them we went somewhere because we took it outside and we played together, and they expressed how they miss their friends. They expressed how, you know, different things that mommy and daddy are both working at home now. And, you know, and my son and daughter-in-law went to work for Uber Eats just to get away from each other a little bit, you know, to have some time away from the kids or away from the house. So we have to really, you know, we have to think about our babies, and we have to think about all of these things and how they're affecting the next generation for sure.
Sure. Any other comments, Dr. Hawkins?
I was just, I was going to check and see if there are any other questions, but I think that the social media piece is probably the thing to really be paying attention to, both access wise and just, you know, noticing. I think we have, if I can, I would take this out, you know, I think policy wise. So I think people in your position, like, we need to be thinking about the policies and things that need to be put in place to support ongoing support for our young people, and really actively trying to put those things, you know, front and center. If you're part of an organization, put together some advisory boards of young people to help inform what you're doing. Really center their voices. We're working with some some foundations right now that are starting to think differently about how they can decenter their own expertise and really center it on those that are most impacted. So I think policy things need to really be mindful of that. There are messages. I mean, I'm hearing our young people are asking, like, what are we doing? You know, they're saying, like, are you leaving a world that I'm going to be able to live in? You know, we need to pay attention to that. So it's not like just in the day-to-day, but really thinking about some of the things that we are doing that will have long-term impact, and putting some programs and some policy things in place with them in mind. You know, not to be cleaning up, but that actually will be supporting them.
That's an interesting idea that I hadn't thought about. So my brain is thinking, well, I wonder what we could do in Rockdale County and to support our youth. So that's very good. We don't have any more questions at this point. I just checked with Janetta. So I thought what we would do, we've got 7 or 8 minutes left, is we just kind of summarize and make some conclusions. I would like to hear from Bill for a minute. Wow. And then we will begin to conclude.
You know, one thing that I would just like to say, other than just thank you, is that for those of us in the recovery community and people who are recovering from multiple things, you know, the opposite of addiction is connection. Mm-hmm. And we had an incredible event, being separated from our supports and from a lot of different things. And so I would just like to shout out to Dr. Hawkins and to Dr. Williams and to Dr. Lewis as well, because when March 17th, we implemented a Zoom platform, which was at the behest of the judge and the commissioner and at the tutelage of Dr. Hawkins. and that platform saved lives. That platform, we've had 2 recovery meetings every day, except for Sundays, from March 17th to now. Wow. And that is an incredible thing, because during the hardest times of this pandemic, we made sure that people were able to come together to the best of our ability and get information, get support, and not just be out there alone. That was an incredible opportunity for us to see that people will come to it if we have it. So that was just one example. And you know, to your point about the youth, I know that the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, under the tutelage of Dana McCrary, has the Certified Peer Specialist for Youth concept. You can reach out to DBHDD, ask for Dana McCrary. They got the CPS Youth Project, and that is young people partnering with young people. And that is because I tell you guys, they're speaking a whole different language from us. And it's important that people hear these messages in their native language. Anyway, that being said, that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. And again, that connection, peer youth, reaching out to youth, you know, someone speaking to someone else who's had a similar experience, that connection is really, really key in managing all the things that all the loss and the hurt and the grief that we have. So, Dr. Lewis, would you like to just sort of summarize your thoughts for us for a minute?
Well, I think we've had an opportunity to share a lot of information, and I hope that the people that are listening, that they're hungry to know more and will seek out more information to be able to heal. I want to say to the people that are experiencing loss, and I think it's probably just about every human being right now, you know, is your loss is real, and people really do care about you. And there are people out there that want to help you get through those things. And one of the most important things you can do is to own your truth and be honest about your story and talk to other people and reach out. You know, you can tell people all day long to reach out, and still people don't reach out. So I hope that you'll reach out. I hope that you'll reach out to someone, and you'll make a sincere effort to heal and to remove the pain that you've gone through, and know that you're not alone. I think that's one of the very biggest things is you're not alone. Other people have gone through similar experiences, even if they've felt them differently. Everybody's felt them. And the last thing I want to say is be a kind human being. Be a kind human being. And when we are all kind human beings and we are lifters of one another and encouragers and supporters and exhorters of one another to be our best self, that's when our society can heal. And, you know, I have one other little story to tell. When I was traveling in Ghana, West Africa, I did a lot of missionary work there. And I had 3 little girls, Lady Pearl, and I can't even remember the 2 other girls' names right now, but Lady Pearl looked at me and she said, "Mama Tracy, is your skin white because you live in America? Were you born black, but because you live in America, your skin turns white? And if I go to America, will my skin turn white?" And that just amazed me, the perception of a 4-year-old child asked me this question. And as we were walking in this village, right in front of us were 3 piles of dirt. There was some real white dirt, some real brown dirt, and some real black dirt. And there was my story to them. And I expressed to them, you see that dirt? My house was made out of this dirt. Your house was made out of this dirt. And your house was made out of this dirt. We're all the same. We all came from the dirt of the ground. There's not one of us that stands higher than another. And if we just recognize that that dirt is, you know, the choice that our creator, our higher power chose to paint our house. And he chose it because he has a purpose for us. And we can shine in whatever color our house is. And it just, I'll never forget that time walking with those little girls and their perception and their understanding. And I just want to say to everyone, we're all the same. People are people around the world. We're all the same. We all came from the dirt of the ground. There's not one of us that's better than another. And we have a responsibility to love one another.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. And could you share your contact information with us? Would you be willing to do that?
Yes, ma'am. You can go to growingdiscoveriesoutreach.com, or you can go to IamEnoughGlobal.com. And those 2 particular platforms will give you some access to me. My cell number is there. My information is there about all the different outreaches and things that Growing Discoveries Outreach does. We also do our transitional housing, and that's newdirectionhousing.org. So you can go to any of those platforms. You can go to Tracy Lewis on Facebook. You can go to Dr. Tracy Lewis on Facebook. You can go to Growing Discoveries Outreach on Facebook, and you can go to I Am Enough Global on Facebook. So I'll be putting out different podcasts every week and to help people in their recovery process. And so I do a lot of different things just as God leads me to do my part in community and do my part in society to be a lifter of men. So I hope that information is enough. Yeah.
Thank you. I think, okay, so newdirectionhousing.org, IamEnoughGlobal.org.com, and there was a third one.
And growingdiscoveriesoutreach.com is our
growingdiscoveriesoutreach.com.
and that's our main ministry website. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So Dr. Hawkins, if you'd like to draw some conclusions, some concluding remarks, and then share how people could connect with you too.
Sure, thank you. So again, thank you for tonight and for everyone's participation. And if you're still listening, thank you. I think all I want to say is that I think we all have to learn the experiences of letting go so that we can let more in. And that sometimes we're afraid to let go. And I know it's one of the lessons I have to learn over and over again, that really when I let go, then things come and I get what I need, and that I generally already have what I need. So find ways to just practice that. And as I like to highlight, ask the questions, what is helping, what could be better, and what is keeping you moving forward, and find a way to make that part of what you ask yourself and ask others over and over again. What's helping? What's making a difference in your life right now? What could be better? What one small thing could make a difference right now? What's keeping you waking up or moving forward? Those three questions really help lead, guide, develop, move us. And it's easy to remember those three. So I will leave you with those as some tips, something to work from. And you can go to www.drdietra.com, so DRDIETRA.com, and find information about how to connect with us and any trainings, or you're looking for coaching or things like that. You can reach out to us that way.
So thank you so much for joining us this evening. I just feel like, I know I feel better. I hope that our listeners feel better. I hope they feel validated in all the little things and all the big things that may be creating grief for them. And we've gotten a few tools on how to do it: gratitude, compassion, listening, connecting, sharing, are all ways to work through our grief.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like the idea of listening to our grief. I can't even remember which one of you said that, but listen to it, pay attention to that, and don't try to cover it up or run away from it. So thank you so much. Good evening to all of you in Rockdale County and all around. We appreciate you being with us tonight.
Yay.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. Good night, y'all.
Thank you. All right. Have a good night.
You too.